making sure that the slides are transitioning. Now, I did have a peek at the registrations before we got started earlier, and recognised quite a few names, which is fantastic. But for those of you who I've not met, my name's Ben Allman, and I look after sales for Broadsign throughout the Asia Pacific region. That's me down the bottom of the photo, not up the top. I'm a relative newcomer to Broadsign. I joined the team probably about 18 months ago, and most of my experience prior to that has actually been on the publisher side as opposed to the tech side. So you might be asking yourself, you know, out of all the people within Broadsign, what qualifies this guy to talk about the fundamentals of programmatic digital out of home? And the answer is not a lot, to be honest. In fact, I should caveat today's presentation by saying that there's plenty which I still don't know when it comes to programmatic digital out of home, but as a relative newcomer to the space myself, I do know how difficult the landscape can be to navigate. So what I want to do today is to essentially cut through the jargon and share with you some of the definitions, analogies, and explanations which resonated best with me when I first started out on my own programmatic journey roughly 18 months ago. And with that said, welcome to the fundamentals of programmatic digital out of home. Everything you wanted to know, but were too afraid to ask. Today's session it's pretty much exactly what it says on the tin. It's a beginner's guide to programmatic digital out of home. And for some of you, this will be the first step you take in terms of getting a better understanding of what programmatic digital out of home is all about. Whereas for others who may be sort of further down the programmatic path, this is I guess a chance to go back to the absolute basics. So any questions you were too afraid to ask in the boardroom, in a client meeting, or in a planning session, we're going to try and answer all of them for you today. So let's take a look at today's agenda. That's a knock at the door, but I certainly won't be answering that mid-presentation, don't worry. We'll take a look at today's agenda. There are three key areas we're going to cover today. Firstly, what is programmatic digital out of home and how does it work? We're also going to ask, what's the whole point of this programmatic thing? And finally, we'll take a look at how you can get started if you're thinking about your first programmatic digital out of home buy. And as mentioned earlier, we'll spend some time at the end doing our very best to answer your questions. I say we because I'm not alone. I do have our marketing director of programmatic solutions, Christian Dion, who is dialed in from Montreal alongside me today. Hi, Christian.
Hello, Ben. Hello, everyone.
Okay, good. I can hear you. So worst case, if I do break out into a coughing fit or lose my voice, Christian can finish the presentation for me. To kick things off, let's start by taking a look at what programmatic digital out of home actually is and how it works. You'll have to excuse my French here. I don't know what I was thinking when I wrote these notes, but I'm assuming most of you have heard the expression, opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one and most of them stink. The same could actually be said for definitions of the term programmatic. And over the past 18 months, I've probably come across more definitions of the term programmatic than I care to remember. And most of them weren't worth remembering, to be perfectly honest. We could spend the entire session today trying to agree on the most appropriate definition of the term, but we won't. The reality is that it means different things to different people. But the definition that I've come across most consistently is that programmatic is the automated buying, selling, and delivery of advertising, which I kind of like. It seems like a good definition. I'd have to say that my favorite definition is arguably the simplest though, and that is that that programmatic simply means buying ads with computers instead of with handshakes and emails. How it works. I found that this image on the screen really helped me to understand how the whole programmatic process works, including who's involved and what they actually do. I should mention that this is a radical simplification of the process, but it'll do for today's purposes. To sort of break this slide up into two easily digestible portions, I suppose. On the left-hand side of your screen, you have the advertiser agency and what we call the demand side platform, which is often abbreviated to DSP for short. These entities are often referred to as the buy side, given they control the buying process. And on the right-hand side, what you can see is the publisher and supply side platform, or SSP, who control the selling process and are often referred to as the sell side as a result. So let's move back to the left-hand side. We'll start from there with the advertiser and agency, given they're the ones controlling the all-important budgets. In order to buy any type of advertising programmatically, regardless of whether it's online, mobile, or digital out of home, an advertiser or agency needs to have access to a demand-side platform. The demand-side platform is basically software which allows advertisers and agencies to buy different types of inventory from multiple publishers. I'll use a few analogies throughout this presentation to hopefully explain some of the concepts. The best analogy I've heard for a demand-side platform is that it's kind of like a stockbroker. So just like a stockbroker buys shares from a stock exchange on behalf of investors, a demand-side platform buys inventory from an ad exchange or a supply-side platform on behalf of advertisers or agencies. I should also mention at this stage as well that Broadsign does offer a demand-side platform. It's called Campsite and is currently available in North America. Now, just as advertisers and agencies use a demand-side platform on the left-hand side to buy inventory and audiences, on the right-hand side, the publishers use a supply-side platform to sell their inventory and audiences. I guess put simply, a supply-side platform is software which allows the publishers to manage, sell, and optimize their inventory and audiences. And Broadsign also offers a supply-side platform to publishers, which is called Broadsign Reach. I guess in years gone by, particularly in the online programmatic space, demand-side platforms and supply-side platforms used to connect via what's called an ad exchange, which is a term that you might have heard before. Whereas these days, it is increasingly common for them to connect directly. And this is represented by the middle of our screen right here, where the buy side and sell side come together. Now, just to recap, this is a radical simplification of the process, right? In the real world, this process takes place across multiple advertisers, agencies, publishers, demand-side platforms, and supply-side platforms, and it takes place simultaneously. Now, I mentioned earlier as well that I'm going to try and use a few analogies throughout this presentation to help explain a few things, because when it comes to programmatic, there are a number of, or a few analogies that people use from time to time to help explain what it is and how it works. And you might be familiar with some of these or may have heard some of these before. The first analogy is the stock market analogy, which is a classic one, which I sort of just touched on earlier when I was describing the DSPs. It's a really common one. The idea here is that the publisher is the company floating its stock on the stock exchange. The demand side and supply side platforms are the stockbrokers in the middle, responsible for buying and selling the shares. And the advertisers or agencies are the investors. Of course, instead of investing in shares, the advertisers and agencies are investing in impressions or eyeballs. So that's a pretty popular one. The shopping center analogy is pretty frequently used as well to explain programmatic. In the shopping center analogy, the publisher is the individual retailers within the shopping centers, which you can see here. And the supply side platform is the shopping center itself, which brings all of the retailers together into one convenient location for the shoppers, who are the demand side platforms essentially. Personally, I found both of these analogies, the shopping center and the stock market, to be really helpful when first trying to get my head around programmatic, but they are a bit of an oversimplification, mainly because they don't necessarily account for all of the different ways in which programmatic buying can occur. And for that very reason, my favorite analogy would have to be the auction house analogy. I've actually stolen this part of the presentation from our GM of programmatic, Adam Green. There's actually a lot in this presentation which I've stolen from Adam, so I do hope he's not watching. But if you think about an auction house like Sotheby's or Christie's or Bonhams, if you're in Australia or the UK, what they do is they put goods up for auction on behalf of their owners. So everything from paintings to jewelry to watches to memorabilia, it all goes up for auction. Buyers bid on those goods, and essentially the highest bidder wins. The auction house analogy, it's pretty similar to the stock market and the shopping center analogies. The supply side platform is the auction house itself. The publishers provide the paintings and jewelry going up for auction, and the demand side platforms are the buyers at the auction. But there is one crucial difference with the auction house analogy. And that's that auction houses are called auction houses for a reason. They're not auction halls. Yes, auction houses do have a hall, but like all houses, they also have a number of rooms. A lot of the time, the auction takes place in the auction hall, but sometimes the auction will take place in these smaller rooms, these auction rooms, which you can see to the left and the right of the slide here. Let's say you're a fanatic art collector. You're a regular at these auctions and you buy plenty of paintings. You might say to the auctioneer, look, I'm one of your best customers. Before you auction any new paintings off in the auction hall, I'd like to have a look at them first. So before taking the painting to the auction hall, the auctioneer takes it to the much quieter, much more private auction room where our fanatic art collector is waiting. In programmatic speak, this would be referred to as a first look deal. You might also have another buyer who says to the auctioneer, any paintings which don't sell in the auction hall, bring them to me and I guarantee I'll buy some of them from you, but you're going to have to give me a discount in return. So this means that the owner of the painting still has the opportunity to sell it, even if it doesn't sell in the auction hall. And it means that they don't have to drop their prices too much in the auction hall. In the programmatic world, this is what's called a last look deal. So the owner of the painting, the publisher, has got options here. They can start by taking their painting to the fanatic art collector in the auction room. If he's not interested, then they can auction it off publicly in the auction hall. And on the off chance that it doesn't sell there, there's always your last look buyer who's waiting patiently in another auction room. This is a pretty common programmatic concept, which is referred to as waterfalling. And the idea here is that the publisher prioritizes who they're offering their inventory and audiences to and when. So in any programmatic marketplaces, there are two places essentially where you can buy and sell inventory and audiences. There's the auction hall in the middle here, which in programmatic speak is most frequently referred to as the open auction or the open exchange. And this is where all of the buyers, the demand side platforms, are invited. And then there's these auction rooms on the side, which are referred to as private marketplaces and often abbreviated to the acronym PMP, which you may have heard. These are smaller invite-only rooms for either individual buyers or groups of buyers. So now we've hopefully established what programmatic is and how it works. Some of you might be asking, so what? What's the point? What can buying programmatically offer me that buying directly can't? And in this next section of the presentation, we're going to take a look at 4 key benefits which come with buying digital out of home programmatically. The first one, it's a big one, it's up the front for a reason, it's agility. This is a hallmark benefit of programmatic technology across any medium, not just digital out of home, and its importance can't be underestimated, particularly at the moment. I mean, in the midst of a global pandemic, advertisers need to be more agile, nimble, and flexible than ever before. Things like government guidelines and restrictions are changing on a pretty much daily basis all over the globe. So having the ability to stop, start, pause, or even optimize your campaign or reinvest it into other channels on the spot can't be underestimated. To give you an example, back in early March, which feels like a lifetime ago, right? We were running a programmatic digital out of home campaign for a prominent white goods manufacturer, and they were promoting their upcoming warehouse sale. Unfortunately, the warehouse sale never went ahead as it was cancelled along with pretty much everything else during the lockdown. But instead of pushing their digital out of home activity back to a later date, what the advertiser did was they were able to reinvest their remaining budget into online activity to support the e-commerce side of the business. So that's a really nice example of the benefit of agility and flexibility that programmatic can provide. The second big benefit of buying digital out of home programmatically is that it can enable you to be a lot more targeted with your buy. Most of you will have heard the expression content is king, especially if you watch Mad Men, but you're probably less familiar with the extended version, which is content is king, but context is everything. The ability to add contextual relevance to a campaign is one of digital out of home's biggest benefits for sure. And what I mean by that is that every digital out of home screen is a blank canvas essentially. And as an advertiser, you can use things like the location of the screen and the time of day to increase the relevance of your campaign. Things like location and time are two very basic classic examples, but there are essentially loads of other data triggers at your disposal to determine when, where, and how your campaign plays. To give you an example, so let's say you own a bar in an airport and you want to advertise half-price drinks whenever a certain number of flights are delayed out of that particular airport, which sounds like a terrible idea, but for the sake of the demonstration, let's go with that. It would be really difficult to buy this campaign the traditional way because you'd have no way of knowing ahead of time when and where it should run. Like, you don't know when the flights are going to be delayed, right? So what programmatic technology does is it enables you to bid on the inventory, impressions, and moments which are most important to you as an advertiser, provided you've got access to the data. And in this case, the data is the departure times for that specific airport. what you can do is you can set up your buy so that the demand side platform you're using will only bid when the rules you've specified are met. So in this case, a certain number of flights need to be delayed in order for the bid to be triggered. The third benefit of programmatic digital out of home is that it enables you to more easily buy in an omni-channel fashion. And when I say omni-channel, I'm referring to multiple mediums, whether it be online, mobile, or digital out of home, all included as part of a single campaign. And this is one of out of home's real strengths. It's very complementary in its nature. We know that out of home has a positive impact on the performance of other mediums when it's included as part of an omni-channel campaign. And there's a stack of research out there supporting out of home's complementary qualities. And don't worry, I'm not going to take you through all of that today, but I will mention that Nielsen conducted some research, which you can see on your screen right here. And this research found that adding digital out of home to a campaign drives 4 times more online activity per ad dollar spent than TV, radio, or print alone. The study also found that digital out of home also makes it almost 50% more likely for consumers to engage with a brand on mobile. So incredibly complementary. A bit of a challenge for digital out of home though is that it can be quite nuanced. No 2 screens are exactly the same, which often makes it tricky to plan and buy, and means that the medium often exists in a bit of a silo as a result. And at the absolute worst, it can actually mean that out of home is excluded from these omni-channel or cross-platform buys altogether. So what programmatic does is actually helps to break down these silos. A lot of the demand side platforms that you might already use for your online and mobile programmatic campaigns can also be used for your digital out of home campaigns. And we'll touch on that a little bit more later on in the presentation. But by using one of these, what we call omni-channel demand side platforms, you can effectively add digital out of home to your online and mobile campaigns while still managing everything through a single platform. And finally, the last sort of key benefit of buying digital out of home programmatically is efficiency. You know, whenever we talk about the benefits that programmatic technology can bring, efficiency typically always gets a mention. That pretzel maker is pretty mesmerizing, right? I could spend hours watching that thing. But earlier on, I shared one of the many textbook definitions of programmatic, that it's the automated buying, selling, and delivery of advertising. A similar but more detailed definition is that programmatic is the automated planning, buying, measurement, and reporting of advertising. I also mentioned that out of home can be a tricky medium to plan and buy. So the ability to automate much of the planning, buying, measurement, and reporting of your digital out of home campaign across multiple publishers brings a great deal of efficiency, which is hugely important at the moment. You know, COVID cuts to salaries, hours, and teams are unfortunately pretty widespread across much of the industry. And I think the reality is that workloads haven't necessarily decreased accordingly. So with a lot of organizations running leaner than ever before, it's, you know, imperative to look at how every aspect of business can be performed more efficiently. So those are 4 key benefits of buying digital out of home programmatically. What you might now be thinking is, this is amazing. Where has programmatic digital out of home been my whole life? How do I get started? How do I buy my first programmatic digital out of home campaign? And there's actually a few different ways in which you can buy digital out of home programmatically. So let's take a quick look at a few of those now. Open real-time bidding, or Open RTB, as it's often abbreviated to. You may have heard the term before. This can also be referred to as the open exchange. Think of this as our auction hall in the auction house analogy we referred to earlier. And it's probably the most commonly understood type of programmatic transaction as well. How it works in digital out of home is an available ad slot is offered to a group of buyers who automatically place bids according to how much that ad slot is worth to them. The system then assigns the slot to the most valuable bid, the transaction is completed, and the ad is delivered. For advertisers and agencies, it's probably the most accessible type of programmatic buy, given you can just throw your hat straight into the ring. You don't necessarily need to have an existing relationship with the publisher. So open real-time bidding could be a good place to start for a lot of online and digitally focused buyers who may not have relationships with digital out-of-home publishers and who may not have bought any digital out-of-home inventory or impressions in the past. We also touched on private marketplace deals or PMPs earlier. They're our side rooms or auction rooms in the auction house analogy. With private marketplace deals, the publisher uses a supply-side platform to provide either an individual buyer or select group of buyers with special access to certain inventory and impressions. So if a sale isn't made in the private marketplace, that's when the publisher may often choose to take that specific deal to the open exchange or the auction hall. Private marketplaces, or private marketplace deals, I should say, can be a really popular way of buying. I guess they provide advertisers and agencies with a more exclusive level of access to the inventory and impressions which are most important to them. One thing that we haven't touched on today is the concept of guaranteed versus non-guaranteed buys, and you can buy both ways in the programmatic world. With a guaranteed programmatic deal, the advertiser or agency and publisher will agree that whenever the publisher offers the buyer a piece of inventory or an impression which meets their criteria, they'll buy it. And this type of buy works pretty much like a direct sale. It's just for people who prefer to get things done programmatically, I suppose. With a non-guaranteed buy, the opposite, the advertiser or agency has no obligation to buy the inventory or impressions being offered to them, just as the publisher has no obligation to make them available. So if there's particular inventory or impressions which are really important to you, we used the example of the bar owner in the airport before. So for the bar owner, maybe it's Friday afternoons when business travelers are waiting for their flight home. Those impressions at that time are really important to them. So it may be worth the bar owner looking into buying that inventory or those impressions on a guaranteed basis, just to ensure that they're not missing out. Now, one of the other things you'll need to do as an advertiser or agency looking to get started is to partner up with the demand side platform. These days, there's quite a few demand side platforms which support digital out of home, but if you're not sure where to start, Broadsign is currently integrated with 35 of them, all of which you can see on your screen right here, and we're always adding new demand partners to this list. So based on your objectives and where in the world you're looking to run your campaign, we can even recommend some demand side platforms to you and make introductions as required. It's a really important thing to be mindful of when you're looking to get started. Now, before we wrap up today's presentation, I just wanted to leave you with a few pieces of advice, I should say, for those of you who may be about to embark on your own programmatic digital out of home journey. Firstly, buying digital out of home programmatically is not the same as buying online advertising programmatically. I can't stress that enough. Both mediums are very different, with completely different affordances in terms of the benefits they provide, their limitations, and how they're planned and measured. So it's really important that you don't go into your first programmatic digital out of home campaign expecting it to look exactly like your online programmatic experience. And secondly, just because you can transact programmatically doesn't necessarily mean you should. Programmatic is there to add value for all the reasons we covered today, but if you already have a good relationship with a particular out of home publisher and you have a relatively straightforward campaign to transact, for instance, you only want to buy a handful of screens from a specific publisher for a specific period of time, it may actually make the most sense to buy from the publisher directly. Like, that might sound crazy coming from a business like ours, which owns both a demand and supply side platform, but we need to do the right thing by our customers to ensure that programmatic digital out of home is successful and sustainable in the long run. And finally, don't stop educating yourselves. It's awesome to have so many of you in attendance on this webinar today, and I really thank you for your time, but it's important that you don't rest on your laurels either. We're all new to this space, myself included, so it's really important that we continue to speak openly, ask stupid questions, and call out any bullshit. Once again, please excuse my French. In fact, some of you might actually be aware of a recent study which the IAB and PwC partnered on. It's called Growing Programmatic Digital Out of Home Opportunities and Challenges, which sounds like some exciting bedtime reading. What the study did is it interviewed senior industry execs across media companies, ad tech companies, and agencies. And a number of perspectives came out of this study as to what the industry needed to do to accelerate the already impressive growth of programmatic digital out of home. But there was clear consensus on one thing, which was education. In fact, it's on the screen now. 95% of participants identified education as a key driver for the future growth of programmatic digital out of home. So it's extremely important. And on that note, it's probably a nice segue into the next slide to mention that, or to share with you, I suppose, some of the resources available to allow you to continue your programmatic digital out of home education. One of those resources is our Programmatic Digital Out-of-Home University, which is it's a series of short videos available through the Broadsign website. They're definitely worth taking a look at. We'll soon be adding some more videos to this series as well, so make sure you keep an eye out for those. And in the chat box, I believe Christian is also sharing a link to, like clockwork, thanks Christian. Christian's going to share a link to one of our most read blog posts titled, "What is Programmatic Digital Out-of-Home?" It's a really good read, and it actually includes several links to other useful resources. So I encourage you all to take a look at that one as well. Thanks for sharing, Christian. And that, with that said, that just about brings us to the end of today's presentation.